Hey everybody, welcome back to NPC US History. This semester, we're starting off History 18, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the expansion of the American West and the settlement of the American West. So I got a short 5-minute video for you here on the settlement of the West. Now remember, this is not a substitute for reading the book. You need to read the book as well. I'm just going to give you a 30,000 foot view of what's going on with the West. So let's get right to it. All right, so first, we are expanding west, right? That's a given. We have seen this happening since the mid-1800s, but this expansion is going to speed up and increase after the Civil War. Why? Well, it's a lot easier to move west. It's a lot easier to move once we are no longer at war. And so we're going to see people moving out west. And when we're talking about the West, we're talking really about everything west of the Mississippi River. So this is a really diverse region. We've got places like Utah, the Dakotas, Arizona, California, Colorado, New Mexico. So a wide variety of experiences and a wide variety of possibilities. The government is making this possible, right? So although this is a lot of individuals and families moving out west, it would not be possible without the government's support, right? The government had supported the building of the railroads, building of irrigation systems to help make it habitable in the West. We'll talk more about that in a second. First, I want to talk about a historian who had a very famous thesis in the late 1800s, and his name was Frederick Jackson Turner. And it was known as the frontier thesis. And he made an argument that the frontier is probably the single most important aspect of understanding American history. He said this is where Americans are really developing their commitment to individualism, to liberty, to freedom, is this struggle to survive on the American frontier that represents everything that it means to be an American. Right? A little overstated. Historians have challenged him since then. But another interesting aspect of his frontier thesis is that the frontier has served as a safety valve. That while a lot of other countries across and around the world have been experiencing rebellions, and those who are unsatisfied have risen up and tried to overthrow the ruling regimes, well, we have the West. And if you don't like things, well, you can move out west and start a life for yourself and live however you want to live. So we've seen that as well. So it's a massive movement. People are moving for a wide variety of reasons, but the main reason is they want new economic opportunities. And we're going to see economic opportunities in the West in the form of farming. Okay, and again, so the farming of the West is going to be made possible by government programs that are going to bring water to the West. There's going to be a lack of water, and the irrigation projects are really going to allow access to farmland in the West as a result of bringing water to the West. Another important factor is transportation. So the government-supported railroads are going to allow these Western farmers to ship their goods to national markets, right? Most people who are moving out west are moving as families, sometimes whole communities. Think of the classic picture of the wagon train. And it's not easy. It's tough. They're facing new challenges, right? Weather, unknown landscapes, new animals, and I think of like snakes and other predators, plants, grasses that are going to cause them troubles as well, and Native Americans. I'm going to talk about that in my next video as well. But the West is being sold. The West is being sold, and it's being sold by boosters. So a lot of the land had been given to railroad companies as part of their compensation. And the railroad companies now are turning around trying to sell it to Americans, right, to make money. And the way that they're doing that is by boosting these land sales. They're advertising them. They're actually going to Europe and advertising land in the American West. Right. And they're advertising it in a way that is not necessarily consistent with the experience that people will find when they get there. Right. They're saying that this is just a golden opportunity. And for many it was, but for many others, it was very, very difficult. Another way that people are acquiring land is not just buying it, but the government has been giving land since the middle of the Civil War to anyone who will go out and settle it and improve it. This is part of the Homestead Act. And you could get 160 acres of land given to you as long as you improve it. That means farming it, building structures, making it your own. And many, many people are going to do this. This Homestead Act will actually be valid throughout the 20th century up until about 1976. It's actually extended till 1986 in Alaska. So even in the 1970s and 80s, homesteading was still a big deal in places like Alaska. All right. So as people are moving out, we see what are called Bonanza Farms, and we see the beginnings of large-scale farming. So this is no longer these small kind of self-sustaining subsistence farms. What we start to see is large factory farms. And as these large factory farms kind of set in, we're going to see some future consequences, not just for the small farmer, but for the environment itself. So pay attention to that in the reading as well. All right. Finally, in addition to farming, ranching was a big part of Western life, right? Cattle drives, open ranges. And so the quintessential image of the West might be the American cowboy. And these cowboys would run cattle. It was a very independent and liberty-oriented kind of job, right? You would run these cattle and transport them and feed them on the open range as you did it. One thing that I think people don't fully recognize is that this was also a very popular opportunity and job for former slaves. So the number of slaves in Texas during the Civil Wars, it was a large number of slaves in Texas, and cattle ranching had been a big part of the Texas economy prior to and during the Civil War. So a lot of slaves during the Civil Wars, their white masters were off fighting the war or advocating with the Confederate government. A lot of the slaves developed those ranching skills. And after the Civil War, when they were granted their freedom, they would become some of the first cowboys. So it's estimated that about 25% of American cowboys were former slaves or African Americans, which I think kind of flies in the face of some of our traditional assumptions about what it means to be a cowboy. So with the expansion of the West, we're seeing new cultures developing. We're going to see new conflicts. We're seeing new methods of engaging in free market capitalism with these Bonanza Farms. All of that we'll talk more about in class. You'll get more information through your reading. All right, and come back for my next video on the impact on Native Americans and the Indian Wars. All right, thanks for watching.